joining me in managing apps in a modern world. And basically, I want to translate this in what is currently available in Microsoft Intune, if we want to manage Windows 10 in a modern way. My name is Peter Daalmans. I'm from the Netherlands, but most likely there are some English-speaking persons in the room, so I'll do this in English. Almost a year ago, I became independent, so I'm a consultant, and in my daily job, I help customers with moving towards modern management of Windows 10, but also help them with Azure AD, conditional access, Intune, etc., etc. So my contact details are on the slide. And since we're here at the PDS conference, I also deliver a 3-day training class at PDS at their location in Culemborg. So if you want to learn more about how to manage your Windows 10 devices in a modern way, but also your mobile devices in a modern way with Microsoft Intune and Azure AD, feel free to go to the booth of PDS, and I hope to see you one day in the class. But let's get started. The agenda of today, we want to have a short introduction. I want to touch on Office 365 Pro Plus, the Microsoft Store for Business, which can also play a role in modern management of apps, Win32 apps, and a little bit about MSIX. I know in a different room right now there's a deep dive in MSIX going on, so I will just touch the surface on that one. So let's start with the introduction. And basically, when talking about apps on Windows, we have a lot of different apps. And since this is AppManagEvent, you all know that we have Click to Run, we have Click Once, we have MSIs, we have executables, we have AppV, nowadays MSIX, PowerShell deployment toolkits, etc., etc. There's a lot going on in the Windows space regards to apps. And it can be a pain to need to manage those in a modern world where we just lightly manage the device, give the users a lot of freedom to do their own stuff without forgetting, of course, the security around it. But there's a lot going on. And to be able to modern manage your devices, we need to do something with all those legacy apps and all those legacy MSIs. And that's not a big switch. Microsoft was hoping that a couple of years ago that everybody was going towards towards modern management with AppX, but that completely failed. So MSIX is hopefully the solution on all our MSI and app issues. But there's still a long way to go. But let's see what's currently available if we talk about app types and Windows 10 together with Microsoft Intune. So, of course, we are able to deploy our Windows Store apps. As we all know, that's a very rich store with a lot of apps. Not really, but we can use those apps and deploy them through Microsoft Intune. Make them available, push them if necessary, and we can also remove them, of course. Another option, which is more common, is the so-called line of business apps, and that can be an MSI file, that can be an MSIX file, that can be an Intune Win file, which I will cover later on. But basically, it's called line of business apps, and my translation to line of business apps is always like, oh, that's a special app for my line of business. But this can be any app. It's basically just installing an app. Next to that, we have the Office suite, which we can deploy, configure, and deploy. So the Office 365 Pro Plus, we can configure the installation behavior in Intune and deploy it to our Windows 10 devices. Of course, there's also connection to the Windows of the Microsoft Store for Business, where we can centrally acquire apps from the store and push them to our users. So, for instance, I had a discussion on the table earlier today about a good PDF annotation software, and it's hard to find in the store because the native Adobe doesn't work, and the native Windows 10 doesn't provide features like that. So I found some kind of app, but if you want to deploy that to your users, you don't want to need your users to pay for it themselves and expense it via the expense sheet. That's too much administration. So the Store for Business allows you to buy 10 or 100 licenses of the app and deploy it through Intune or SCCM. And of course, we are able to deploy web links, basically web apps. So those apps can be assigned to a group of users or a group of devices. And if we talk about assignment, then if you have required apps, that's more for corporate-owned devices. For me, it's always hard for Windows personal devices in an enterprise. I don't really like those devices in the Windows space, but most likely most devices are corporate devices in your and in my environment. So we can either make them available through the company portal, or just push them directly through the MDM channel. And if we talk about modern management on mobile devices, you can make them also available with or without enrollment. And that's more on a personal device. So, if we talk about Office 365 Pro Plus, and if we talk about Office as a general, we now have two versions. We have the Office 2019 and Office 365 Pro Plus. How many of you are using Office 2019 currently? You? For a specific reason or? For yourself, okay, cool. How many of you are using Office 365 Pro Plus? Which is great, because with Office 365 Pro Plus, you get all the latest and the greatest through the monthly or bi-yearly updates via the channel. It's Microsoft's purpose to have the majority of the people on Office 365 Pro Plus. But there are some environments where you need to have a stable Office version. Think of VDI, or server-based computing, where you don't want to have the image constantly updated, of the app constantly updated. So this is for a stable version. Office 2019 only is updated for security patches. If there's a security patch for Office, then Microsoft will release that for Office 2019. So it's the stable version, and in Office 365 Pro Plus, you get all the new stuff with all the benefits of allowing to install it on 5 PCs if you have a license for it. And the only way of seeing the differences is if you start Word or PowerPoint, you see which version you are using. But if you, for instance, use PowerPoint, you see that I'm using currently a feature called Morph, and you only will see this feature in the new Pro Plus version and not in the 2019 version, because that's being added after the initial release of 2019. Regards to supportability, 2019 has a mainstream support until 2021, and then that will be moving towards extended support, and most likely there will be a new version, a new baseline version of 2022, for instance. And then that version will be stable for another couple of years, where Office 365 Pro Plus will be evolving. A lot of new features will be added throughout the years. So there are some changes coming up. Also regards to earlier versions, and I think the main big change is that Office 365 services will block all the old Office versions. So if you are still on Office 2010 or Office 2013, you need to do something in the upcoming months/years, because the service will block all those legacy versions. And I think the minimum version will be Office 2016, which is allowed to communicate with Office 365 because of all the modern authentication stuff which is changing in the service. So make sure, if you're using older versions, to update to at least one of the supported versions, or to Office 365 Pro Plus, and then you will have support all the time. So how can we configure the deployment experience for Office 365 Pro Plus or Office 2019? There's a service called config.office.com, and that's basically the old-fashioned Office customization tool, which was available in the deployment toolkit back in the days, and I think it's still available. But nowadays it's a service, so let's have a quick look at this. So this is a Microsoft service, and let's just create a new configuration. And here we are directly able to select which platform we want to support. So in this case we use 64-bit, and we're able to select the supported versions of Office 365. So you see only the latest versions that are available. So we will select Pro Plus, and if we have a Visio project or additional products, we can easily add them also to the deployment. In this case, we leave it out, and we're able to select which update channel that is going to be used. So we have the monthly targeted, where we just basically receive directly the update after it's being released. Then we have the monthly channel, which you receive the update with a delay. Then you have the semi-annual channel. You get 2 times a year the update, and in the same versions, targeted and with the delay. So in this case, we just choose targeted. You get a warning, and we're able to select the latest version or an older version if you want to start with an older version. In this case, we choose the last one, and we're able to select and pick and choose what applications are being installed. So we deselect publisher, maybe Skype for Business, because Teams is nowadays also part of the Office 365 Pro Plus. And we click Next. Then we're able to select languages. So we choose Dutch, and maybe we don't want to have any other languages, but you can add different languages if we want to. Click Next. We can configure where the source is coming from a local file share, of a local HTTP file web service, or just using the Office Content Delivery Network back in the Microsoft Cloud. We can configure the upgrade behavior. So what happens if there's already an Office version available or Visio project? We can configure, okay, just leave it there or just install everything and then install the new version after it. We can leave this as default. Product activation user-based, because it's normally when you install this on a user's device, the user has the license for Office 365 Pro Plus assigned to his account, so we can leave it also by default. We can add some information about the company, click next, and we are able to configure, see the overview and configure different settings we want to be using. If we click finish and then export, we can export this to an XML file. And this XML file, we can use this XML file in Intune, but we can also use this in, for instance, your existing deployment method, like Config Manager, or if you have SamWorks, you can use this most likely also with SamWorks. But let's have a look in Intune, how this works. So if we go to Client Apps, to Apps, we have the option to add a Windows 10 Office suite. And then we are able to use either the configuration designer, which I will show you in a minute, or we can just enter the XML data and then just paste it in. And after adding some metadata about the Office app, we can create this, add this and deploy it to our users. Another way is by using the out-of-the-box experience in Intune, by using the configuration designer. And basically what happens if we provide some details again, we have a similar experience, let's choose the right node, in Intune also. So we are also able to select which applications we want to install, which architecture, which update channel, and how to work around with user activation, maybe some extra language packs. We can do the most used options. We can use this also from the Intune console. If you have more advanced, if you need more advanced options, like shown, you can use the config.office.com service also to create the XML. So there are two ways in deploying Office 365 Pro Plus. So you've seen the option to remove older versions of Office if they are available. Until recently, when you deploy or change a deployment of Office 365 Pro Plus, the user would receive the new information, the new package, and then Office would be removed and reinstalled. So that is basically a pain, because they end up with a certain amount of time without any Office and without Outlook, etc., etc. There's a new XML option to use. If you use version is match installed, then it will check which version is installed. If it's the same version, it will only add, for instance, your language pack, or Excel if you forgot to select that initially. So make sure to have a look at this, otherwise you end up with a lot of unhappy users losing temporarily access to Office. Like every service nowadays, Office 365 and the clients are moving quickly. So a lot of new features are being added on a monthly basis. Make sure to bookmark this website and look at it frequently, because all the latest and the greatest will be documented here. And most likely you see some new stuff which is also applicable for your environment or for your users. So for the Microsoft Store for Business, and this is an integration which is available already for a long, long time. How many of you have looked at the Microsoft Store for Business? A couple of you. If you have worked with Apple, you know there's the volume purchase program website where you can acquire the apps. This is the same for the Microsoft environment. You can use this, like I said, to acquire the apps for your users, but this can also be used to upload your own line of business apps and make them available this way through the Microsoft Store for Business. So it supports online and offline versions. Online is mostly used together with Intune. And if you want to have an offline version, you could download the AppManagEvent file or MSIX file and deploy it with a third-party software deployment tool like SCCM. You can search and select your products, acquire them. There's a little bit of a minimal role-based administration control in it. So if you have separated departments that are responsible for acquiring apps versus deploying them, there are some roles in it. It is limited. And you can synchronize those apps with Intune and to deploy them from the company portal, via the company portal, or push them directly without any user interference. So how does this work? Onboarding. We have the on the left side, your left side, we have the Windows Store for Business. We have Azure AD in the middle and Intune. So first we need to log in to the Microsoft Store for Business website. We need to gather a list of MDM vendors which are currently configured in Azure AD. By default, this is Intune, but this can also be Mobile Iron or whatsoever, or Config Manager. We configure Intune as the MDM vendor, and then the synchronization will be set up. So you can manually sync apps, and by default, this is done every 24 hours. So you can initiate it if you acquire an app and you want to have it instantly available, then this can be done manually. So in this case, we retrieve the AD service tokens from the tenant to see if everything is all right, and we synchronize the data from the Windows Store for Business to Microsoft Intune and retrieve all the apps and the app IDs from the Microsoft Store for Business and create them in Intune, so we are able to deploy them. So if we want to deploy an app to a Windows device, and I see there's still a Windows Phone listed. I think wishful thinking for me. I wish it was still there. But as an IT admin, we can assign, in this case, a required Windows Store app from Intune. And then every X amount of time, by default, every 8 hours after your device is enrolled, the device checks in for new policies from Intune, and then at the same time, the information will be gathered again from Azure AD. The licenses will be, if the app is targeted, licenses will also be assigned in the Windows Store for Business, because you may only have 10 licenses for a certain app. So if the 11th user wants to acquire or install the app, it will be blocked because you need to buy more licenses. So that is a tight integration. And then the app install command will be issued, and the app will be requested from the Windows Store for Business directly. And the app will be installed. And after the installation status will be reported back to Intune or your other deployment method. And then we're good to go. So if we look at the Microsoft Store for Business and the integration with Intune, we have the Microsoft Store for Business here. You need to authenticate with an administrator with permissions. And in this case, if we go to Manage, then we have the option to, let me see, Settings, Distribute, and here you see that all down Microsoft Intune is configured as the management tool, the deployment tool. So this was the first step to go into the portal and activate this connection. You can also deactivate it when you're done if you don't want to use it anymore. But in this case, we want to acquire an app. And if I go to Shop for my group, and then let's have a look at PDF, what's there. It's a free PDF reader, which is always good because I don't need to pay it. So I say get the app, and then close. This is enough for Intune. So if I move back to Intune and go to Client Apps again, then to trigger the sync, I have the option all down for the Microsoft Store for Business. And I have a sync option over here. And this sync will normally take up a couple of minutes. So if I go to Apps, you also see here a full list of apps. And let me, for instance here, this is an app from the Microsoft Store for Business. So this one is an app from the store which is synchronized to Intune. So I think this is the one I requested. It is created and available. It's created on the 11th of October. So the only thing I now need to do is assign it to a group of users, make it available for enrolled devices or required, and then we're good to go. Easy as that. So when we talk Windows 32 apps, we not only talk about Windows apps that are 32 bits. We will talk about apps that are available for 32 bits platform, but also 64-bit apps. But we also talk about maybe PowerShell scripts you want to deploy, executables, updates, etc., etc. So with the Windows 32 apps in Intune, we're able to close the gap, or not completely close the gap between Config Manager with the app model versus Intune, where we only had the mobile MSI on the left side just a couple of years ago, when we only could deploy single MSI apps, which is useless because you need to repackage every app to one single MSI. So how does this work? So for Windows 32 apps, there's some kind of app model also. So we have the Intune Win file, and this is basically a file which is the wrap version of your MSI or executable installation. I will show you later on how to create something like that. We have the app metadata, which is information about your application, basic information for your administrative purpose. But we also have the end user metadata. We have requirement rules. Where is the app allowed to be installed, on what kind of version of Windows, etc., etc. We can also, of course, add install and uninstall commands, where we, in the old way, from the line of business apps, we only could upload an MSI file and some parameters for the MSI exec, and that was it. Now we can add complete install strings or uninstall strings. With detection methods, we can check if an app is already installed or not. So if the app is already there, we don't want to download the app another time. And with the return codes, we can of course check if an installation is ready or not. And they recently, a couple of months ago, I need to update this slide, they added also dependencies. So we can also create a chain of apps that are depending on each other. So if you have an app that requires .NET Framework 3.5 or whatsoever, if it's not available and it's dependent on the app which you want to install, then .NET is installed before the other app is installed. So it's, yeah, Microsoft way in closing the gap a little bit with Config Manager. So basically, how does this work? Yeah, you download the tool from GitHub. You create a folder with your installation source of the app. You wrap the app, encrypt it, and you upload it to Intune. So for app inventory, this is good information also for working with Win32 apps. Normal MDM inventory is collected every 7 days, but the Win32 inventory is collected every day. So this is a lot more, more often. So for detection methods, I will run through this in a demo shortly. You can create a detection methods. This can be a registry key, but this can also be a PowerShell script where you detect if some kind of complex app is already is installed in the right way or already available. Requirement rules, discuss that. Checking which Windows version, if there's enough free disk space, if the system architecture is right, etc., etc. And then, of course, app assignment, required, available, uninstall, and with the Azure AD groups, you can include and exclude users and devices. So how does an install works? It's the same kind of workflow as seen earlier. We upload the app via Microsoft Intune to the content delivery network of Microsoft. The device checks in, an agent is installed because the normal MDM features of Windows 10 doesn't support this kind of installation of apps. So Microsoft created Intune extensions that is installed as an agent, which is installed extra, which allows you also to execute PowerShell scripts via Intune. So the agent is installed, the agent checks in, the app install command is issued and evaluated. Are the requirement rules okay? Is the The detection method detects if the app is already there or not. If the app is not there, the content will be downloaded from the content delivery network. It will be unpacked, and the installation will be fired. So let's have a look at this. So let's first start with, wrote a couple of blogs about how to install the Citrix client with Intune. In the beginning, I needed to repackage the Citrix client because it wasn't executable, and an executable, we weren't able to install this. I was able to extract the executable, but then I was ending up with 11 or 12 MSI files. And at that time, with the mobile MSI, we couldn't create dependencies, so we didn't know which MSI was installed in what time, so we couldn't define the order. So with this, we are able to, or we are not able, or we don't need to extract it. So what we need to do is use the Intune Win app util, and we need to provide a source path, which is -c, and then the executable we want to install, and the output. Make sure that the source path only has the source files of your in this case, Citrix receiver, because it will wrap everything in the same package. So by executing this, the app is wrapped, and after a couple of seconds, we have the Intune Win file. And the Intune Win file is the file with the executable and with information about the app itself. So it's all signed and encrypted. So the next step is going back to Intune, client apps, where we are able to create a Windows 32 app. And first step is just by uploading the Intune Win file. And if we click OK, then we can configure the app information for the administrator. So let's add some dummy data. We can add categories, owners, etc., the usual metadata. And next we can configure the install and uninstall script of parameters. So in this case, it's really easy. It's just Citrix workspace app.exe/silent. And for uninstall/uninstall, we can either install it for a user or a system, leave it default. And then we can configure the requirements. And this is just, for instance, selecting which operating system architecture and what minimum version of Windows needs to be there. So let's choose this one. And of course, you can add your custom requirements, and that can be a file, checking if a file exists or not, or if a registry key exists, or by running a script, and based on the results of your script, you can see if the requirement rules are being met. So in this case, we cancel this, click OK. Next, we need to configure the detection methods. So in this case, let's just add a manual one. And we are only going to check the registry if the Citrix key exists. And if it exists, then it doesn't need to be downloaded anymore or deployed anymore. So click OK. And then we can add the app. It's being uploaded to the content delivery network. and from there we can assign it to a group of users or a group of devices and deploy it accordingly. So if we quickly look here, I already have the Citrix receiver prepared. I can press reinstall. Yeah, go ahead. No, this is the Citrix receiver is not coming from the business store. This is coming directly from Intune, and this is the company portal I'm using. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But the company portal is used to also deploy apps which are available, deployed as available apps from the business store. So this is, in a modern world, this is the new software center if you have worked with SCCM. Yeah. 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 So let's see if it's installed or not. Not yet. So, but it will flow down. For time's sake, let's quickly move on because I want to touch on another subject in the last couple of minutes. So there are, of course, a couple of limitations. There's no scheduling, no maintenance windows, dynamic Azure AD groups. There are limitations, and basically that's an issue with dynamic Azure AD groups because there is some latency when you enroll a device. Then it will take a couple of minutes or sometimes a couple of hours before the device is being added to the dynamic group. So users need to wait until the device is being added to the Azure AD group. And it's only available for corporate devices. So devices which are Azure AD joined. There are some troubleshooting options. The slides will be shared. They are, however, limited. It's not as rich as with Config Manager. So let's quickly move to the last part, and that's MSIX, and that's basically what I call AppV on steroids, because it's the goal of Microsoft to merge everything towards MSIX. And if we are there already, not yet. If you go and talk with John Vinsel and his colleague, then they will also acknowledge that we're not there yet, but it's at least the way forward for Microsoft regards to apps. So basically, what is it? It's if you're familiar with AppV, it's a virtualized, it's app virtualization, and what the key points here are that if you install an app and you remove it, then everything is actually removed, where AppV also left some information behind sometimes. It's a single instance storage, so if you have multiple apps with multiple versions and sharing same data, same app information, it will be only downloaded one and will be only available one time. And it uses network optimization. It's OS managed, so you can use Windows updates for it. And it provides, I think that's the most important part, it provides integrity checking of the app itself. So the app is signed, and if there's tampered with the app, then the app won't start. And with other versions, with MSIs, with AppV, if somebody was able to change the app, it would just start if it isn't signed or checked or whatsoever. So at least Microsoft is trying to create a safe app environment. So how does the MSIX file look like? It's basically one file with all the information together, with the app manifest, with the app signature, the tamper protection because of the block map and signature. we have of course the application files and install parameters in the manifest file, so it needs to be secure. So let's quickly move on because it's 1:45 already. Basically, the main message is we have still a lot of choices when it comes to Windows 10. Some are there ready for use, some are there maybe to start thinking about it, to test it, like MSIX, to just test it, see if it can help you. But in the end, I think we want to move away from MSI files, and I think Microsoft also wants to move away from MSI files in the future. Is that done this year, next year? Most likely not, because a lot of companies are relying on those apps. This will take years and years, but yeah, the way forward is more modern, let me put it that way. So if you have ideas, regards to Config Manager Intune, go to user voice. The product group is actively looking at this space to see how to improve both products. And I guess Windows with MSIX has also their user voice. So with that, I want to thank you and have a nice day.